In the spring of 1942, amid escalating air battles over occupied territory, a young bomber crewman faced a situation no soldier is trained for. A burning aircraft, 15,000 feet of empty sky, and a parachute already on fire before he even jumped. By all logic, by all mathematics of gravity and heat and altitude, he shouldn't have survived. And yet he did. What happened between the moment he bailed out of the flaming bomber and the moment he hit the ground became one of the most improbable survival stories of the war. This is the extraordinary account of Airman Karl Hoffmann, the man who fell from the sky with a burning parachute, and lived to tell the story.
It began as just another reconnaissance escort flight. At dawn, the bomber group lifted off from a makeshift airfield carved from cold, muddy soil. The air was crisp. The engines hummed with familiar rhythm. The crew joked during warm-up. Hoffmann, only 23 at the time, cleaned his goggles and tightened the leather straps on his helmet. He later said it felt like any other mission, maybe even easier than most. The briefing had been straightforward. Escort a reconnaissance aircraft, stay at medium altitude. Expect light enemy presence. But no one told them about the hidden anti-aircraft positions recently moved into the valley they were about to cross. By the time they realized the danger, it was far too late. At 15,000 feet, the bomber formation banked over a narrow mountain corridor. That's when the first explosion hit. A blast tore through the right wingtip, scattering metal fragments across the sky. The aircraft lurched violently. Hoffmann was thrown against the cabin bulkhead. Seconds later, another burst of flak detonated under the fuselage. The plane jolted, nose down, then stabilized, barely. Smoke filled the cockpit. The intercom crackled with panicking voices. "Engine 2's on fire. Fuel line ruptured. We're losing altitude. Fast." Hoffmann reached for the fire extinguisher. Then the world lit up. A third explosion ripped through the bomber, engulfing the rear section in flames. The heat was so intense that the metal siding blistered. The order came through, distorted but unmistakable. "Bail out! Bail out now!" Hoffmann grabbed his parachute pack. But as he turned to attach it, the fire behind him surged forward with a roar. The flames reached the storage rack, where the parachutes were kept. Canvas ignited instantly. He could see it clearly, his parachute straps blistering, smoldering, shrinking from the heat. He hesitated for only a moment. Another blast rocked the bomber, throwing him toward the open hatch. Smoke poured inside. The ticking seconds between life and death narrowed to a single choice: jump with a compromised chute, or burn with the plane. He clipped the harness, coughed through the smoke, and stepped toward the open sky. Behind him, the fire was already chasing him down the corridor. The moment Hoffmann jumped, the cold air hit him like a hammer. 15,000 feet, wind tearing past his face, the ground a distant blur of patchy forest and snow. He reached for the ripcord with trembling hands and pulled. The parachute deployed, but not fully. Flames had eaten away several sections of the canopy. The silk unfurled in a ragged, uneven shape. Half of it was charred black. The remaining fabric flapped violently, struggling to catch the air. He immediately felt the difference. A functioning parachute slows the fall dramatically. His didn't. He was still plummeting, just slightly less catastrophically. He felt the air pulling the damaged canopy sideways, spinning him out of control. His vision blurred, his arms shook from the force. He tried to stabilize his descent, but every correction spiraled him faster. The burning smell followed him all the way down. At around 12,000 feet, the spin intensified. Hoffmann later described it as being trapped in a tornado of gravity. He couldn't tell which direction was up. The clouds mixed with the ground. His gear pulled at him. His harness tightened painfully. The human body is not meant to spin at that speed while falling. Unconsciousness often comes within seconds. But Hoffmann refused to black out. He forced his chin down, pressed his arms inward, and tried to fight the centrifugal pull. His experience as a crewman dealing with high-G maneuvers gave him just enough resilience. Still, he was losing the battle. At roughly 8,000 feet, his vision narrowed into a tunnel. At 6,000 feet, he nearly blacked out. And then something unexpected happened. Crosswinds near the valley suddenly collided, pushing him sideways. The burning half of the canopy caught additional air, just enough to stabilize the spin. The parachute, barely functional and riddled with holes, now acted like a broken sail rather than a spiral. His descent slowed. Not enough for safety, but enough for hope. He regained partial control. His breathing steadied. He looked down and saw trees rising rapidly. He had seconds to react. He grabbed the straps and positioned his legs as he was taught in training, even though he knew the landing would be brutal. Hoffman crashed through the tree line at high speed. Branches tore at his uniform, ripped open his sleeves and slashed his face. A heavy branch struck his leg, likely fracturing it on impact. He tumbled, bounced off the forest floor, and skidded across the snow. When he finally stopped, everything was silent. No flames, no spinning, no deafening wind. Just the faint crackle of burning parachute fabric above him. He tried to move and collapsed. But he was alive. Against every calculation, every survival chart, every expected outcome, he was alive. Pain pulsed through his leg. Blood covered his gloves. His head throbbed from impact. But the training kicked in. Assess injuries. Conserve strength. Look for shelter. Avoid exposure. He crawled toward a fallen tree and pulled himself underneath for cover. Snow began to fall. The cold bit through his clothing. He drifted in and out of consciousness. Hours passed. Then he heard voices, distant, muffled, approaching through the trees. He prayed they were friendly. A reconnaissance team sent to locate the downed bomber found Hoffman just before nightfall. They were stunned. A burning parachute meant one thing: zero chance of survival. And yet here he was, barely conscious, shaking, frostbitten, but breathing. The medic who examined him famously said, "He shouldn't be alive. Not with that chute, not from that height." The soldiers carefully lifted him onto a sled and began the long journey back to the camp. Hoffman survived the night, and the next, and the next. His body had endured the impossible. It took weeks for Hoffman to recover fully. Doctors cataloged his injuries. Multiple fractures in one leg. Severe bruising across chest and shoulders. Concussion. Frostbite on fingers. Deep cuts from tree impact. But what shocked them most was the parachute. The recovered canopy was examined in detail. Over 40% of the silk was burned away. Support cords were weakened by heat. Several sections were fused together. The harness showed signs of direct flame contact. Engineers concluded that the chute should have failed entirely. Mathematically, the descent speed should have been lethal. Yet Hoffman survived with non-fatal injuries. Historians, engineers, and aviation experts have analyzed the event for decades. They identified several key factors. The crosswind shift. It partially stabilized his fall at the last moment. The forest canopy. Trees absorbed part of the impact, his body position. Training instincts reduced lethal trauma. Sheer luck. The damaged canopy caught just enough air to slow descent. But even with all these factors, most experts still agree. He beat the odds by a margin so small it defies explanation. Hoffman's survival became a quiet legend among air crews, not publicly celebrated, not widely reported, but whispered among pilots as proof that sometimes fate intervenes. He returned to service months later, limping slightly but otherwise unchanged. When asked how he felt about surviving a fall no one should walk away from, he reportedly said, "I didn't survive because I was brave. I survived because I wasn't ready to die." His burning parachute, now preserved in fragments, remains a testament to one of the most improbable survival stories of 1942. A man who fell from the sky, on a parachute that shouldn't have opened, from a height that should have guaranteed death, and lived.